Hello there, welcome to SaberDuel Gaming, where we always take the high ground, and welcome to a retro review of Super Soccer on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Whether you look at it at a fan-by-fan basis or simply down to the financial figures, football, yes, football, not soccer, is the biggest sport in the world, and this revenue translates heavily into the computer game market. While games such as Championship Manager and Pro Evolution Soccer have also dabbled heavily into this market, I think it's fair to say that the FIFA franchise has been the undisputed champion for over a decade. However, before that, we had games like Super Soccer. The game that would become known as Super Soccer was originally released prior to the 1990 World Cup on the PC as Formation Soccer. The game was eventually ported over onto the Super Nintendo Entertainment System as Super Soccer, and already the game was therefore 2 years old. That said, at this point, for console gamers, this was probably the best they'd ever seen, so Nintendo probably knew they could get away with it, and just stuck that Super prefix in front of it like they had with most other games. From the menu screen, you had limited options. You could play an exhibition game or a tournament. From that point, you could either play as 1 or 2 player, you could even take penalties, so for the time, this was fairly standard. The teams available were all internationals. There was no license involved at all, so the kits were an estimation. The actual strength of each team was relatively accurate considering the teams at the time, and from that point on, you could make some minor tweaks to the formations, and then it was time to actually play the game. While it has to be said from the start that the controls were quite sluggish, this was still one of the best football simulations out there at the time of its release. The graphics were bright and colourful, and for a 16-bit console, this was about as good as it had ever gotten. So, on its release, this was quite a successful and enjoyable game, and it has to be said, especially as a 2-player, that was where this game really shone, when you didn't have to worry too much about the opposition being skillful while you struggled, because in a 2-player mode, the opposition was probably struggling the same way, and you could just relax and hopefully have some fun with it. There was no individual players, or even hints of them being different characters. Hell, it was basically a squad of the same person, but it was still visually quite entertaining for the time. However, even the graphics soon became quite repetitive. Yes, there was a few different cutscenes and animations for different things such as goals, free kicks and yellow cards, but other than that, it was the same stuff. It had a little bit of variety when taking penalties, and in fairness, the majority of times I played the game, it was penalties we enjoyed, especially in a 2-player mode, because the laggy controls, they weren't as much of a concern. You just pointed and shoot, and this was probably the most enjoyable aspect of the game. However, even that soon became quite repetitive and left you with a very limited game to play. The game received scores between 60 and 70%, which put it in the category of, if you really want a football game, this'll do, but don't expect it to win any awards. Unfortunately, the game's longevity really took a hit when the very next year FIFA International Soccer was released. Once FIFA officially stepped into the computer game market, games like Super Soccer were left miles behind. FIFA International Soccer had official licensing, substantially better gameplay and graphics, and was getting scores in the mid-80s. So Super Soccer, it didn't really have a chance of lasting. But what about from a retro perspective? No, it's slow, sluggish, and just too hard to play. While some old games have a particular quality to them, games like this have just been left behind. Hell, a new football game's been released every single year, and this just feels like a dinosaur. Maybe just because of its retro charm, I feel able to give it a 4 out of 10, and that's being pretty damn generous. Thanks for watching. Do you call it soccer or football? Comment below and let me know. And you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, and right here on YouTube.